Paris, 1669. Rain lashed the cobblestones as a single carriage rolled through the iron gates of the Bastille. No crest, no name, just silence and fear. The guard stood frozen as the door creaked open.
If he speaks,
Inside, a man stepped out bound in chains, his face hidden behind a mask of black iron.
Who is he?
Not leather,
call him the
not
warden.
cloth.
he
Iron.
takes the others.
Even the sound of his breath was swallowed by the metal. He didn't speak, didn't resist, didn't plead. He just stood there, tall, calm, and eerily composed. The warden unrolled a parchment. The king's own seal burned red at the top. It read only 3 lines. This prisoner's name is forbidden. He is to be confined alone. If he speaks, no one will answer. No reason, no trial. Just a command from the Sun King himself, Louis XIV. The guards hesitated. One whispered, "Who is he?" The warden lowered his voice. "A ghost the king wants forgotten." Chains dragged as they led the masked man down the damp stone corridor. Torches flickered against the walls, lighting centuries of misery, and now, one more soul lost to silence. When they locked him inside the narrow cell, he didn't look back. He simply turned his masked face toward the window, a slit of light no wider than a finger. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, a legend was being born. For weeks, the guards whispered. They said his voice was too calm. They said he prayed in Latin words no common man would know. And when a guard once asked, "Who are you?" the man replied quietly, "Someone the king once called brother." The next day, that guard was gone. No record, no transfer, no farewell. From that night on, no one dared speak to the prisoner again. His cell became a tomb of silence, and his mask, a mirror for every secret France tried to bury. Years later, historians would argue about who he really was: a traitor, a twin, a prince. But in that cold cell, none of it mattered, because sometimes the most dangerous man in the kingdom is the one who knows the king's true face. The palace of Versailles stood like a dream made of gold, but inside its walls the air was heavy with secrets. The king walked alone through his mirrored hall, his footsteps echoing softly. He had the world in his hands, yet sleep never came easily every night. He heard the same whisper inside his mind. The voice was calm and familiar. It said one sentence again and again: "You can hide me, but you cannot erase me." Servants noticed the change in their king. He smiled less. He spoke in short bursts. He watched his courtiers with suspicion. Every mirror in the hall felt like an enemy. One morning a letter arrived on the royal table. It carried no seal and no name, just a single sentence written in neat and steady ink. The man in the mask remembers. The king. Read it again and again. Then he burned it with a shaking hand. No one saw the fear in his eyes, but it spread through the palace like smoke. That night he summoned his most trusted minister. They spoke in the garden far from the ears of the court. The minister asked quietly who the prisoner was. The king turned away and said nothing for a long time. At last he whispered the words that would haunt France forever. "He is my blood, and that is the reason he must never be free." A silence fell so deep that even the wind refused to move. The minister bowed and walked away. He understood that some truths were too heavy for the crown to carry inside the Bastille. The masked man sat by the wall. He lifted his head as if he could hear the words spoken miles away. The same storm that touched the palace roof rolled above his cell, and though no one saw it, a faint smile formed beneath the iron mask. The king tried to sleep again that night, but when he closed his eyes, he dreamed of another face that looked exactly like his own. The Bastille was not a prison made for escape. Its walls were thick as mountains and its corridors smelled of wet stone and fear. For years no one had ever left it alive. Yet the man in the iron mask was not like the others. He never begged. He never raged. He waited and watched. Every step of every guard was counted in his mind. Every turn of every key was memorized. Time became his only weapon. One evening, a young guard was sent to bring food to his cell. The boy had joined the Royal Army only months before. He was curious and foolish in equal measure. He looked at the mask and asked softly if it was heavy. The prisoner raised his head and spoke for the first time in weeks. He said that the mask was lighter than the lies of kings. The guard froze at those words. Something inside him shifted. He began to return each night bringing extra bread and a candle stub for light. The warden did not notice at first. As days passed, the guard learned to trust the quiet prisoner. He told him of the city outside, of the laughter of the river, of the smell of bread in the morning. The masked man listened in silence. One night, when the tower was still and the wind howled through the bars, he whispered a plan. The guard would unlock the gate at the second watch. The prisoner would follow the drainage tunnel beneath the courtyard. It was small, but it led beyond the eastern wall. The guard hesitated. He knew the punishment for helping a prisoner was death. The man behind the mask only said that freedom is worth any end. When the second watch came, the boy returned with shaking hands. He turned the key and opened the gate. For a moment he saw the prisoner step into the darkness, but then the sound of boots thundered behind him. The warden had known all along. The tunnel was searched. The boy was taken away and never seen again. The man in the mask was found kneeling in his cell, his hands folded as if in prayer. The warden asked why he had not run when the gate was open. The prisoner answered slowly. He said, "The gate to my cell was not the one I needed to escape." In the great palace of Versailles, whispers moved faster than truth. The Queen of France lived behind a smile that never reached her eyes. Every day she passed the king in long halls filled with mirrors and gold, yet between them stood a wall that no crown could break. She had once loved him before power turned his heart to stone. Now she carried a secret that burned in her chest like fire. One night when the court slept and the wind howled beyond the gardens, she sat alone by candlelight. On the table lay a piece of parchment and a silver quill. Her hands trembled as she wrote. The words came slowly, but each one carried the weight of years. She wrote of the prisoner in the Bastille, the man whose face was never seen. She wrote that his voice had once spoken softly to her in another life. She wrote that he was not a stranger, but the shadow of her own past. Tears fell upon the paper, but she did not stop. She begged whoever found the letter to show mercy to the man behind the iron mask. She said he was not a traitor. He was the blood that kept the kingdom alive. When she finished, she sealed it with her ring and hid it inside a hollow stone near the chapel wall. She whispered a prayer to no one in particular. Days turned into weeks, and the queen walked through the palace as if nothing had changed. Yet the king noticed the quiet distance in her eyes. One morning he found her standing by the window watching the clouds drift across the sky. He asked what she was thinking. She said only that some truths cannot be buried no matter how deep the grave. The king said nothing, but his gaze turned cold. That night the chapel was searched and the stone was broken open. The letter was gone, no one saw who took it. Some said a servant loyal to the queen. Others said a hand from within the royal council. But in the Bastille, a small piece of parchment slipped under the cell door reached the prisoner. He lifted it slowly, read it in silence, and for the first time in years a single tear fell beneath the iron mask. The prisoner had spent years in silence, yet he understood more than anyone in the kingdom. Every guard who passed his cell, every whisper of the wind, every flicker of torchlight told him something hidden. He knew that kings could hide armies and treasures, but not the truth of blood. That knowledge had become his companion and his weapon. At night he traced the lines on the walls with his fingers, imagining maps and plans. The letter from the queen rested in his pocket and burned with meaning. He knew she risked everything to reach him. He knew that if the king discovered her loyalty, it could mean death for both. Yet the man in the iron mask did not fear death. He had spent a lifetime wearing it. The days were long and the hours felt heavy, but he counted them carefully. He remembered the faces of the city, the sound of the river, and the laughter that once reached the palace halls. Those memories were fragile, but they gave him patience. He would wait until the world made a mistake, until a guard forgot a key, until the walls revealed their secret path. One evening, the warden entered his cell and paused. The prisoner looked up and spoke in a low voice that seemed to echo through stone. He said that no chain could hold the weight of truth forever. The warden shivered and stepped back, but said nothing. That night, the prisoner dreamed not of freedom, but of justice. He imagined the king standing alone in the hall, realizing that power cannot erase what exists in silence. By the candlelight, he folded the queen's letter and placed it beneath the edge of the cot. He whispered softly words meant only for the walls. The Bastille had kept men for centuries, yet it had never contained what could not be hidden. The prisoner closed his eyes and waited, knowing that the time to act would come soon. The night in the Bastille was never silent. Shadows crept along the walls as if they had a life of their own. The prisoner watched them move and listened to the faintest echoes that bounced through stone corridors. Every sound, every flicker of torchlight carried a message. He understood the rhythm of the place better than any guard. One evening, the wind brought a strange smell of wet earth and distant fire. He sensed that something was about to change. The guards patrolled their rounds, but their footsteps faltered as if the walls had shifted. The prisoner rose from the floor and touched the cold stone, tracing invisible lines that only he could see. The shadows responded, subtly bending and stretching in the corners of the cell. He spoke softly to the darkness, and the darkness answered in a language no one else could hear. It whispered of doors, long forgotten passages beneath the tower, and the missteps of men who thought they knew every secret. He smiled beneath the iron mask because he understood that freedom was not a force to be taken, but a path to be revealed. Through the long night, he watched as shadows moved toward one another, forming shapes and patterns like a puzzle only he could solve. He counted their motions and imagined a world beyond the walls where truth would finally meet power. By dawn, the air was still again, but the prisoner knew that the night had left a gift and that the next move belonged to him. The king awoke before dawn, his mind heavy with unease. The court slept, but he felt the weight of something unseen pressing on his chest. He could not place it, but every instinct whispered that the prisoner in the Bastille had shifted something beyond his control. He walked the long halls of Versailles, his footsteps echoing against marble floors. Mirrors reflected his face, and yet he felt he was staring at someone else. The iron mask haunted his thoughts as if the man behind it had reached out through walls and chains to touch the very heart of the palace. Advisors whispered rumors, but the king dismissed them. He trusted nothing that could not be ordered, commanded, or controlled. Yet deep in his chest, a cold truth settled. The prisoner knew more than any man should. He had seen the letters the queen had written, the plans she had hidden, and perhaps even the doubts the king had buried inside himself. By the end of the night, he was exhausted, yet restless. He ordered new guards to watch the Bastille and double the patrols. Still, he could not shake the feeling that the prisoner was already moving in ways he could not see. He knew that soon the balance of power might shift forever, and that the man in the mask might claim a truth the king would never forget. For years, the prisoner had studied the walls of his cell. Every crack, every groove, every irregularity in the stone was mapped in his mind. He had counted the seconds of guard footsteps, the flicker of torchlight, and the subtle shift of air currents. In the darkness, he discovered secrets that others could not see. One night, the warden had left the gate slightly ajar by mistake. The prisoner did not move. He waited patiently until the corridors were empty, until the silence became a shield. Then he traced his hand along the damp wall and felt a hollow space behind a loose stone. He pressed it gently and the wall shifted, revealing a narrow passage that had been hidden for decades. The passage smelled of mold and earth. It twisted and turned beneath the Bastille like a living thing. He crawled through, slowly listening to the faint echoes of the world above. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. The iron mask weighed heavy, but it reminded him of the discipline that had kept him alive. As he moved deeper, he could feel the pulse of the city outside. The sounds of the river, the distant bark of dogs, the faint murmur of late-night voices all reached him, as if calling him to freedom. He paused at each corner, examining the walls for traps, for guards, for any sign that this path had been used before. Hours passed, yet he did not waver. The passage led downward toward the eastern wall of the fortress, where the moat had long been forgotten. At last he reached a small opening, just large enough for one man to slip through. He pressed his face to the iron bars and inhaled the cool night air. For the first time in years, he could imagine the sky, beyond the stones, the wind against his face, the smell of freedom. The Bastille had kept him for decades, but it had not accounted for patience, for cunning, or for the mind of a man who knew every secret of its walls. The prisoner smiled beneath the mask and stepped toward the darkness beyond, knowing that the path to liberty had finally revealed itself. The night was thick and quiet as the prisoner slipped through the hidden passage. Each step echoed softly against the damp stone walls, yet no guard stirred. The city beyond called to him with faint lights and distant sounds. He felt the weight of decades in his bones, yet his mind was sharp and focused. At the moat he paused. Water lapped quietly against the old stones, and the moon reflected off its surface like silver fire. He climbed the narrow ledge and looked back once at the fortress that had kept him bound for so long. Its shadows seemed to reach for him, yet could not touch him. He jumped into the water and let the current carry him away. Freedom was not yet complete, but for the first time in decades he felt the wind against his face. The iron mask weighed heavy, yet he moved forward, knowing that the world beyond awaited, and the truth he carried could never be silenced again. The man in the iron mask vanished into the night, yet his story did not end. Across France, whispers carried tales of a prisoner who had escaped the Bastille. Some said he walked among the people unseen. Others claimed he appeared in dreams, warning kings of secrets they should not hold. Generations passed, and the mask became a symbol of mystery and defiance. Artists painted shadows of his face, writers told stories of his courage, and historians debated his identity. Every palace, every prison, every quiet street seemed to hold a trace of his presence. The Bastille crumbled with time, yet the legend remained. Those who seek truth in silence feel his shadow behind the walls. The man who once wore the iron mask proved that even the strongest chains cannot bind a mind that knows freedom. And so his story lives on, whispering through history for those who dare to listen.